The portfolio of grants and promoting limited government all over the world. I can see you're approaching us. Maciej Kuziemski, PKO Foundation, President of the Board. Maia Mazurkiewicz, PZU Foundation, President of the Board and expert in communication and counteracting disinformation, the author of TVP World programs, and Matt Warner, Atlas Network President, supporting NGOs in over 90 countries. I would like to invite my panelists to join me on stage. All right, so please come to the stage.
To może pierwsze pytanie do...
The first question goes to Maia. Maia, do you see a democratic future or a populistic, autocratic, not liberal future? Well, how much time have we got? Because we could talk without stopping. Give us first the ABC answer and then give us a justification. I believe that the future depends on us. So if we are talking about the future in the political aspect, it's very much dependent on us because we take the vote. It's the concept of our freedom and democracy we live in. However, we have to be aware that there are different circumstances, surroundings. We can see disinformation, for example, which influences our society, it changes our attitudes and tries us to make us vote in the specific way. For the past 4 years, we still live under the threat, under fear. So if we want to be rational, we are all people and emotions govern us. And nobody taught us how to cope with our emotions. And social media are based on our emotions. So when we think of our future, we have to think what we want. What kind of future, what kind of vision we want to have. And we have to realize that it can take different forms, even if we consider look at the Euroactive survey, how Poles perceive Ukrainians. Initially, 94 Poles wanted to have Ukrainians here, and now only 54% of Poles are for having Ukrainians here. So we have to have a space for dialogue. The worst thing we can face is the polarization. So the future depends on us. Alex, the question to you. All these dilemmas, whether we have democracy, whether authoritarianism or dictatorship, will they be important to mankind if the climate disaster accelerates, and it will result not only in droughts and floods, but also there will be a huge wave of migrations when the south will be running away from starvation and it will flood the north, and we will have the total chaos on our planet. Is this a realistic vision?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me. Absolutely, yes. The ideas we talk about over the next 2.5 days are crucially important. And I think that's for many reasons. But in relation to the question asked, when it comes to, say, immigration into Europe and climate change as a whole, there are ways, despite the huge problems it could have for humanity, to overcome it. So if we think of climate change in regards to extremely warm weather, well, there are many countries in the world that have extremely warm environments and weather, and you don't find loads of Australians trying to get into Europe, for example. We've got regions across the world, Dubai, Las Vegas. So human innovation can indeed overcome some of these problems. And if we then think of climate change in regards to perhaps natural disasters, climate adaptation, thanks to innovation, has been just staggering in the last 100 years or so. Over 100 years, the number of climate-related deaths due to natural disasters has declined by 96% in 100 years. And that's despite adding about 6 billion to our population. So we can do it, but the way we do it is through innovative solutions and also becoming wealthy so we can, perhaps afford to build a big solid house rather than a mud shack, for example. But even if you just kind of disagree with what I just said and you think it's a huge problem, well, the solution, therefore, would actually still be the same, is our desire to try and get as many poor countries as rich as possible as soon as they can. And that way, we're not only alleviating the suffering of millions, but opening up human flourishing, increasing human agency. And that would also mean then we won't have the potential scenario of billions of immigrants banging on Europe's door. So that's why the ideas of this event are also so important, because these ideas don't just apply to Poland, they don't just apply to Europe, they apply across the world.
Bardzo dziękuję.
Thank you very much, Matt. Your interests are around the area of economy. So the question to you, whether migration, no matter what it's triggered by, the war or economic aspects or climate change, does it always pose hazard for the economy, or can it be an opportunity for development?
Thank you. Well, I'm come from a nation of immigrants, and we know that robust, dynamic economies often are characterized by a very diverse population. I think one of the things is this cutting out
Coś nie działa z mikrofonem.
Yes, we do have a problem with the microphone.
that we've observed in the United States, for example, is that we have a long history of immigration, but people today are losing trust in the integrity of our institutions and in the way that immigration is handled. And there's a lot of concern of cynical motives behind some of the policies that are being advanced. And so this speaks to a larger issue that we all have to face, which is the institutional integrity of liberal democracy. And we are, today we are about, I think it's 18 years of declining democratic norms, according to Freedom House across the world. So those of us who care about the future of liberal democracy have to care about the integrity of the institutions and the rule of law, so that people can trust in the rationality, as our previous panel commented on, that is necessary to accommodate the different interests in a way that people can get behind. But the free flow of people and labor is easily one of the most effective anti-poverty programs in the world. But we've got to trust the institutions that have the authority over those kinds of movements. And this year is a high watermark year for democracy in the sense of the number of elections and people voting. And so it's a real opportunity to reemphasize the importance of liberal democracy, the benefits both morally and materially of liberal democracy, and in so doing, hopefully reverse this 18-year decline.
Dziękuję bardzo. Maciej, jeszcze do ciebie pytanie, czy patrząc w przyszłość,
Another question. When we look into the future and when we talk about migrations and respect to human rights, whether is it possible to cope with the migrations and at the same time maintain humanity? It's a difficult dilemma. I understand that I do not have 1 hour to give you an answer. Okay, I'll be speaking briefly. First of all, I do not envy politicians to have this dilemma. I think that the reverse demographic pyramid in Poland requires to treat the discussion on migration seriously. If we are not convinced by other arguments, due to the demographic regions, we are sentenced to the pluralistic population in the future. So it's probably valid for all the discussions that we will have during the next 2 days. It's hard to talk about migration without the context of security. So the discourse about security is a framework that organizes our thinking in Europe, in particular in the Eastern NATO flank. Probably the most important question we have to ask ourselves in Poland is the question how we can become Polish without being Polish ethnically. So what kind of identity-related policy are we going to deliver to accept all the immigrants who will come to Poland in future, and they will want to have their future in Poland, because Poland is developing great. Maia, you are involved in cybersecurity, and you are also dealing with democracy, liberal democracy. Do these two notions go together, liberal democracy and development of new technologies? I would like to ask you whether artificial intelligence is a threat or an opportunity to the liberal democracy. Do we maybe need some solutions that should be applied to be able to stop artificial intelligence from some actions? First of all, I think that the new technologies represent our opportunity, but it's also a risk. As I have already said about the fear, one of the next topic that is discussed and people are afraid of it, this is the new technologies and the artificial intelligence. We hear a lot about these two. There are people say, what will happen if AI will replace me? And then people talk about the war between artificial intelligence and people. So we need to talk about the norms and values. Artificial intelligence is something that develops greatly. It can become our ally. It already is. I use GDP chat to verify my texts. Maciej has already mentioned it in the context of our demographics. It can provide us with a great support in the future in the context of different options of working in the future. But we have to provide a framework. The European Union has already issued an AI Act, and many states are working on such provisions, legislations. So we have to specify the norms. We have to know the direction of development in this context. And first of all, we need to provide funding. So institutions, countries have to provide funding to allow countries that develop new technologies to allow these companies, these firms to develop. Alexei, one question to you, and I would like to ask you for a short answer because we don't have enough time. Democracy or populism when we are talking about the future? Which of these options has a better future in your opinion? What should we expect?
Well, thank you.
Nie czego byśmy chcieli i oczekiwali.
It's not about what we want and expect, but what is more possible.
Yes, so I feel here I've got a slightly controversial point, but just bear with me for a second. And that is, at least in English, my language, if you look up the word populism in a dictionary, it's quite a vague term. It says a set of political ideas that are intended to garner support from ordinary people to give them what they want. Now, that does actually sound a lot like democracy. So when we say in English populism, and that someone is a populist, I feel actually we're talking more about some brash big man figure, or big woman figure, of course, who's trying to solve all our problems. And of course, the way we avoid that is through education. I think it's first most important to realize that the government is not going to come and save you at the end of the day. And it's actually much more on an individual and community level where stuff gets done. But for the future, I'm still extremely optimistic for democracy. Bear in mind, we've only spoken about Europe here. Consider the rest of the world. Consider the emerging democracies are rising despite their problems in South America, Asia, Africa. The future is still looking bright.
Matt, i ty, jak sądzisz?
Matt, what do you think?
Yes, the most important thing is to secure the individual freedoms. There are many benefits to that. It's both the best moral arrangement we've figured out as a species, and it very fortunately has incredible material benefits as a function of the way that individual decisions aggregate to move towards things that work. And so liberal institutions are what we're after, and democracy, as messy as it is on the whole the best way of maintaining and securing those. That doesn't mean that it's done a perfect job. It seems to be suffering at the moment. But that is our best hope. And so that is where I'll be putting my eggs. And a great observation was made by several politicians that liberal reform and liberal agendas are effective when when the energies are spent 20% on getting the institutions and the policy right, and 80% explaining and selling this to the people. And too often, I think we don't do the hard work of explaining and arguing for why this is so important.
Bardzo dziękuję i Maćku,
Thank you very much. And Maciej, last question to you. I'm looking at the clock, so half a minute left for you. We are thinking about our future, or perhaps we should consider whether there is any future at all. Well, the pessimism of intellect and optimism of will. Definitely there is the future. Quoting one of my favorite authors, everything needs to change for everything to be left as it is. We are in a difficult moment when globally we negotiate our social contract and the aspects related to climate change. The cognition apparatus which we use does not fulfill its functions. So two key words to understand the future and to handle it: increase resilience and invest in social infrastructure so that we enter the time of uncertainty better prepared with greater trust, more autonomy and social integrity. Thank you very much for participating in the panel. Thank you very much for your attention. And I would like to thank TVP viewers. It's the end of our broadcast, but join Freedom Games in Łódź the whole weekend ahead of us.
Jedzą kanapki z kawiorem.
Nadzwyczajna kasa.
Obrażanie dziennikarzy telewizji polskiej.
Chodzi o działania polityczne.
Przygotowanie ofiar dla pedofilów.
Für Deutschland.
TVP Info. Włącz się na nowo.
Radość, nadzieja, życie, wyzwanie, pasja, pamięć, zaufanie, pokój, jedność. Słowa tworzą świat. Polskie Radio. Źródło wiarygodnych informacji.
Plany biznesowe powstają z marzeń. Dlatego nie ma dwóch takich samych firm. Jedni chcą działać na całym świecie. Innym cały świat mieści się w dłoni. Sukces biznesu to nie tylko jego wielkość, ale też szczęście, jakie przynosi ludziom. PKO Bank Polski.
Uwielbiam szycie w sieci. Wczoraj podszyłem się pod wnuczka, wieczorem uszyłem intrygę na apce randkowej, a dziś planuję grubymi nićmi szyte oszustwo z promocją. Tak się szyje.
Na oszustów są sposoby. Zapoznaj się z poradami ekspertów na niedajsiepodszyć.pl.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it and how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Polskie Radio.
Jedynka.
Rodzina spółek Pelion to 12 tysięcy osób pracujących w ponad 300 spółkach w Polsce, Szwecji, Wielkiej Brytanii i na Litwie. Jesteśmy liderem w branży ochrony zdrowia. Od 1990 roku dbamy o długość i jakość życia. Pracować z nami możesz w jednym z 7 obszarów.
Dziś Nowy Jork, jutro Londyn. Za chwilę Paryż, Warszawa, Berlin. Na całym świecie kultura pulsuje rytmem. Wystarczy tylko włączyć dwójkę. Dwójka, Polskie Radio. Jesteś na miejscu.